"Why aren't you eating dinner?" my father-in-law asked, seeing us for the first time in a long time for New Year's. He must have noticed that there was only enough food at the dining room table for 3. "It happens all the time." "What?" My father-in-law looked curiously across the table at my mother-in-law and husband. "What exactly do you mean by it happens all the time?" "A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren would have to be a slave, wouldn't she?" My mother-in-law responded casually while chewing on the hamburger steak I had made. "That's right. Ruby is our slave. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat," my husband chimed in, echoing his mother's sentiment. As expected, he continued, "He took me to his mother's every weekend to help her with housework, even though you couldn't give her grandchildren. I'm letting you stay here. You should appreciate her and do the best you can for my mom." I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I had made a commitment. Even if I refused to go, my husband would verbally force me. He knows I have a short temper and difficulty finding my words. "Mom, I brought a slave. He even greeted me that way recently." "What are you talking about?" My father-in-law seemed offended by the way my mother-in-law and husband referred to me as a slave. "That's not how a normal family with children behaves. Ruby, it's not your fault. You should stop bullying her." "What do you mean? You're the one that lives so far away, so stay out of the problem," my husband snapped back. "That's right, Dad. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the possibility of having grandchildren," my mother-in-law added, with a tone that sounded like they were mocking my father-in-law. I tossed the coffee beans in the grinder while listening to their conversation. My mother-in-law and husband always ordered me to bring them coffee as soon as they finished eating. I was so busy with shopping for my mother-in-law that I only had time to eat a piece of sweetbread earlier. "Come on, I'm hungry too. I'm not sure what I'm doing," I muttered to myself as if escaping from the grinder's blade. A single coffee bean fell to the floor. "My name is Ruby, and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During the weekday lunch hours, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same local bank as my husband, but I left 3 years ago to focus on fertility treatment. We were unable to have children, so we sought medical attention and were told that the problem was on my side. After a year of treatment, I was told that it is impossible for me to get pregnant. My mother-in-law and husband changed shortly after that. Originally, we were both working and managing our own income and budgets. When I decided to leave my job, my husband took on the responsibility of covering our living expenses. He managed our savings, paid the bills for rent and insurance, and started giving me a monthly allowance. At first, we were able to live comfortably on $1,000 a month. However, when we stopped pursuing fertility treatments, my husband suggested we could save money. "Since we don't have fertility treatments anymore, you can save money," were his first words after we made the decision to stop trying to conceive. "Because of the financial burden of the treatment, I've been giving you more money for living expenses, but you don't need it anymore. You can go back to work if you want," he'd added. True to his word, he gradually reduced the amount he gave me, first $800, then $600, and eventually $500 a month. There was a time when I desperately tried to find work, but even then, my mother-in-law interfered. "Working as a full-time employee is not good for a wife," she asserted. "If you don't share the housework, she will divorce you." "So you're saying I shouldn't work?" I questioned. "Of course, if it's only part-time, then fine. You need to devote yourself to Carl and serve me. You can't even have grandchildren, so it's the least you can do," she replied. Despite enduring painful treatments, I couldn't conceive. My mother-in-law's attitude towards me changed drastically. She'd call me frequently, asking me to run errands, and I worked every weekend at their house. No matter what I did, she found fault and complained incessantly. "Why are you folding laundry like that? Why not put the corners together and fold it correctly and neatly? Do it again," she'd scold, even throwing the laundry onto the floor once. It seemed like she relished in hurting me. One evening after dinner, my father-in-law noticed my distress and offered to take me out for a drink. "I'm going out for a drink. Do you want to join me?" he asked, showing concern for my well-being. His kindness touched me deeply, and I couldn't help but cry. "I saw that, and if you want, you can vent to me," he reassured. He took me to a local bar where we sat across from each other, sharing a beer and a whiskey soda. As we ordered mixed nuts and a salad, his compassionate presence was a welcome relief from the turmoil at home. I could tell Elizabeth and Carl were being rude to you, my father-in-law began, taking a sip of beer. He listened attentively as I poured out my grievances about how his wife and son had treated me since I stopped fertility treatments. I'm blamed for not being able to have children and am forced to run errands, I confided. My husband wouldn't let me work full-time, and he's reduced my living expenses since we stopped the treatments. Now, he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave, I continued. Elizabeth is not happy unless she gets her way. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Carl. She would yell at me so much that I began to dislike her, and now we pretend to be a happy couple. Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be with me? I'm jealous my father-in-law has a place to escape to, I admitted. You're not tough enough to make yourself heard, he observed. Yeah, but venting to you makes me feel better, I admitted gratefully. Good, that makes me happy, he said before we had one more beer and one more whiskey soda before leaving the restaurant. However, as soon as we arrived back home, the situation escalated. I'm back, I announced as I opened the door, only to find my mother-in-law and husband standing there. Dad, did you have a night out with my wife? My husband questioned, eyeing both of us. What? I just invited Ruby for a drink, my father-in-law clarified. What kind of relationship is this that you can go out for drinks together? My mother-in-law interjected angrily. Just like your husband said, I retorted, feeling the tension mounting. What are you thinking, Ruby? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man? You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires, my husband accused, joining in the finger-pointing. Enough. A powerful voice echoed as if thunder had struck. My father-in-law was enraged, staring down Carl and Elizabeth. What is it with you? All I wanted was for Ruby to relax, he thundered, his anger palpable. The rage sped up my heart rate. I thought, noting the intensity of the moment, mild men or people can become more difficult to deal with when injured. I mused, watching Elizabeth shudder at her name being called. Was she scared of him, or did she have something to hide? You said what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law that you go out drinking together? My husband challenged. That's my daughter-in-law is treated like a slave, and I took her to get her mind off it. That's what happened because of Ruby, my father-in-law clarified, cutting through the tension with his explanation. I can't have grandchildren, my mother-in-law's accusation hung in the air, a barb aimed directly at me. The words ignited a desire to yell, to defend myself against her constant blame for not providing her with grandkids. How can you say that when you hate children? I wanted to retort, but I bit my tongue. Yet even in my silence, I couldn't shake the urge to challenge her unfair judgment. Well, grandchildren are different than other children, aren't they? I finally spoke up, my voice edged with frustration. That said, I don't think you wanted grandchildren enough to treat Ruby like this. You're just making an excuse to point the finger at her. My mother-in-law seemed about to respond, but then she abruptly averted her gaze. Was she tongue-tied or perhaps fearful of her husband's reaction? Carl, wait, my attention shifted to my husband. I heard you only give Ruby $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? I probed, unable to ignore the discrepancy. No, I pay rent and insurance, he countered, but his evasive response left room for doubt. As the silence stretched, he seemed unable to conjure a convincing explanation. I came here to discuss our future. Let's get right to it, my father-in-law intervened, leading us to the living room. What do you mean discuss our future? Just sit down, my mother-in-law commanded, her tone imperious. Make some coffee first, Ruby, she ordered, her words laced with condescension, but my father-in-law's sharp rebuke cut through the air. Don't tell her what to do. I complied silently, sensing the tension crackling around me. As the coffee brewed, my father-in-law resumed speaking, his tone authoritative. I'll be retired in a few years after my current assignment ends. I won't be living with you anymore. The revelation left my husband and mother-in-law stunned. What do you mean? They both protested in unison. We've been masquerading as a couple for years, so we no longer need to live together, my father-in-law explained calmly. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here. But my mother-in-law's panic was palpable. That's fine, but I changed my mind after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier, she protested, rising from her seat. I'm selling the house, Elizabeth. I'll leave you nowhere to live. Her announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Why don't you just get a place to live? My father-in-law suggested. But her response was desperate. How am I going to do that? I can't pay the rent. Get Carl to help you, my father-in-law suggested, unaware of the financial strain. He only gives her $500 a month. I'm sure he can pay for you. But my husband's nervousness betrayed him as he struggled to respond. That's not possible, he stammered, his discomfort evident. We don't have any money. If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt. The revelation hung in the air, casting a shadow over the room. You just mentioned debt, didn't you? My father-in-law's tone turned grave. Explain. I didn't mean what I said. I said explain. My father-in-law's voice thundered through the room, his anger palpable. My mother-in-law dissolved into tears at the sound of his fury, but his rage remained unabated. Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer, my husband confessed, his expression resigned. Around the time we stopped fertility treatment, Mom made an investment. She made some money at first, but then the stock market crashed, he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt? I interjected, incredulous at the revelation. I used family funds. At the time, we were betting on stocks that were supposed to go up, but eventually we ended up in debt. Now, I'm paying it with my salary and Mom's repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket, my husband explained, his tone heavy with the weight of their financial burden. The news caught me off guard. I had never heard anything about stocks or debt. My mother-in-law had lost a significant amount of money in the stock market and had borrowed to compensate for it when I stopped fertility treatment. She must have tried to repay the debt by investing in stocks that were expected to rise. But as they struggled with repayment, those stocks failed to yield returns. Maybe. I couldn't help but voice my thoughts. That's also when you and Carl began treating me like a slave. Ruby, what are you trying to say? Were you just taking it out on me? My mother-in-law challenged, her voice strained. The slave treatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments. I doubt it's because she wanted a grandchild so badly. But the simple answer is that she was taking it out on me because that was satisfying. I countered, the bitterness evident in my tone. As expected, my mother-in-law remained silent, her guilt hanging heavy in the air. And Carl used the money that he took out of my monthly expenses to pay off his debts. He could save money because there's no fertility treatment. He didn't give me less money for some strange, unknown reason. He just needed the money to repay his mom's debt. I concluded, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You stupid idiot. Finally, my father-in-law erupted, his frustration boiling over. Even if it's family money, it's money. I worked for and saved for you, only for you to invest it in stocks without consulting me. To top it all off, you lost it all. What the hell kind of money are you spending? My father-in-law exploded, his frustration boiling over. With those words, he abruptly left the room, as if struck by a sudden realization. We all followed him, wondering what he was up to. What are you doing? My husband questioned as we trailed behind him. Show me Elizabeth's stuff. I'll check what she's buying, my father-in-law demanded, his tone sharp. Stop, Elizabeth cried, her voice tinged with panic, but her husband paid her no heed. He swung open the closet door, revealing a trove of luxury handbags. Rudy, are these bags expensive? They're all luxury items costing over $1,000, my father-in-law remarked, his tone incredulous. As he opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet, an array of accessories greeted our eyes, rings, necklaces, and earrings, some adorned with diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones. Picking up a ring, I noticed the engraving indicating it was made of 18-karat gold. Elizabeth, you bought all these expensive things without telling me? My father-in-law's disappointment was palpable. I'm sorry, but Elizabeth began, but her husband cut her off with a look of disgust. All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Ruby like a slave. Divorce. I want a divorce, and I won't take no for an answer, he declared, his voice resolute. But how am I supposed to live? Elizabeth protested, her voice trembling. Talk to Carl. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move, my father-in-law retorted, leaving Elizabeth speechless. My husband, no longer wearing his arrogant demeanor, nodded silently, his gaze averted. The next day, my father-in-law presented 2 sets of divorce papers. Here, Ruby. If you want to file for divorce too, he offered, handing one to me. I glanced at my husband, who sighed and turned away. Of course, I wanted a divorce, but more importantly, we wanted alimony from these people. That night, as I lay awake, I pondered the events of the past years. How long had I suffered in silence? What did I want now? I had once yearned for a child, enduring agonizing fertility treatments, only to realize I couldn't conceive. I continued my story, holding back the tears welling in my eyes. All the painful tests and treatments I endured in hopes of becoming a mother seemed futile now. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't have a baby. As I grieved, Carl informed me that since I no longer needed fertility treatment, he would reduce my living expenses. "What are you saying? This is all Carl's fault," Elizabeth interjected, her voice sharp. My father-in-law's horror was palpable, and my mother-in-law fell silent, her accusations hanging in the air. She had blamed me for not giving her a grandchild and then treated me like a slave. "Do you know how hard it was for me?" I demanded, my frustration boiling over. Naturally, there was no response from Elizabeth or Carl. In the end, Carl's actions were driven by his need to pay off debts, while Elizabeth sought an outlet for the stress of financial losses in the stock market. "I want you to reimburse me for this," I declared, my voice firm. "What if I say I won't pay?" Carl retorted defiantly. "Sure, I'll talk to my lawyer," I shot back, my resolve unwavering. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. Within days of putting his house on the market, he found a buyer who intended to tear down the old house and clear the land to build a new one. Left with nowhere to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment, barely holding together. She now resides with my ex-husband, struggling to make ends meet while paying off their debts and alimony to me, a financial burden I'm sure weighs heavily on them. Meanwhile, I found solace in a beautiful little apartment and secured a clerical job at a security company, thanks to my father-in-law's support. He encouraged me to utilize my accounting knowledge and skills from working at a bank. "I want you to be happy. If you ever need help, just tell me anything," he reassured me, his unwavering support a beacon of hope. With my father-in-law by my side, I embarked on this new chapter, determined to shine on my own. As I dressed for my first day of work, I made a promise to myself to embrace this fresh start and forge my path to happiness.
You need to get out of that wheelchair quickly, or you might get hurt. I could hear Tyler's happy voice behind me as I desperately tried to stop the wheelchair from speeding up. I pulled on the brakes as hard as I could with my hands. Tyler was someone who didn't care much about money, but we were supposed to be celebrating our love that day. As I struggled with the out-of-control wheelchair, I felt more angry than sad. Suddenly, something got caught, and I was thrown out of the wheelchair. There was a loud noise, and I blacked out. The next day, I woke up in a hospital room. Tyler was crying on the next bed. After a while, he noticed me and started talking, trying to sound comforting. "Are you okay, Amy?" "I'm glad," he said, with a forced smile. Then he started talking about how he got hit by a car and lost his leg. He became more emotional and showed me his amputated leg under the blanket. "Hey, you're going to help me, right? We're married, aren't we?" he said, expecting me to agree. But I refused. Tyler was shocked. "Who's going to help me then?" he asked. I decided to share my thoughts. I told him about myself, that I'm Amy Moore, a 45-year-old illustrator who used to love being active. I even competed in national swimming competitions when I was younger. But about 2 years ago, I got a disease that made my left leg weak. Now, I can't walk without a wheelchair. I explained how Tyler and I met at a group date and fell in love. We got married after dating for 3 years. We were happy until I became disabled. That's when Tyler's attitude changed. He started demanding money from my family to make our home accessible and to hire a helper. When I told him I planned to use my savings for that, he got upset, worrying that it would affect his inheritance. Tyler tried to apologize and backtrack, saying he thought we would need a lot of money from now on, but I saw through his excuses. I didn't trust Tyler's excuses. He seemed obsessed with keeping our money intact. Despite my doubts, I tried to convince myself that it was just his usual stinginess. Tyler kept bringing up inheritance and insurance. His excuses turned into suggestions like upgrading our insurance policy. I couldn't understand why he was so fixated on money. In the end, despite Tyler's protests, I decided to use my savings and bonus to make our home wheelchair accessible. I also hired a housekeeping service 3 times a week to help with chores. The woman in charge was kind, and I enjoyed chatting with her during breaks. But Tyler seemed to dislike her. He nitpicked everything she did, from folding laundry to washing dishes. His complaints annoyed me, and one day, I exploded in anger. Tyler's response shocked me. He said he'd deduct the amount we paid the housekeeper from our living expenses. That meant I'd have to cover the extra cost, as Tyler planned to keep that money for himself. I was stunned. Our living expenses were already tight, and tripling my contribution wasn't feasible. Tyler didn't seem to care. He thought since I was earning, I should foot the bill. But my income wasn't enough to cover such a huge increase in expenses. However, Tyler didn't show any signs of backing down. He agreed, but asked me to make sure to save that extra $1,000 properly. With Tyler agreeing so cheerfully, I couldn't shake off the anxiety building inside me. And unfortunately, my worries soon came true. Tyler stopped griping about the housekeeping agency, but in turn, he stopped helping with any chores around the house. I tried to remind him that we still needed to pitch in with daily chores, even though we hired help. But Tyler brushed it off, saying that since we were paying for it, they should do everything. He started spending more time away from home, barely talking to me when we did cross paths, wearing a disgusted expression on his face. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind. Then out of the blue, Tyler suggested we go see the cherry blossoms at the botanical garden. It was a surprising invitation after 2 months of minimal interaction. His cheerful demeanor during our outing momentarily eased my troubled heart. Maybe our recent problems stemmed from not talking enough, I thought optimistically. But as we strolled, Tyler dropped a bombshell. He confessed that he was out of money and needed my insurance payout urgently. Confused and alarmed, I panicked when I realized he was pushing my wheelchair downhill without my control. Desperately, I tried to stop the speeding wheelchair, but Tyler's voice echoed merrily behind me, warning me of the danger. Despite my efforts to hit the brakes, the wheelchair hit an obstacle, throwing me off, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up the next day, I found myself in a hospital room. Tyler was beside me on the next bed, crying. After noticing I was awake, he spoke to me with a pleading smile. "Amy, you're safe. I'm glad. I was hit by a car. My leg. Tyler became increasingly emotional and uncovered himself, revealing that he only had one leg. "You'll help me, right? We're husband and wife, aren't we?" "I refuse," I replied firmly. Tyler was stunned. He never expected me to refuse. Speechless, he stared at me. Why would I help someone who pushed me down a hill just to get insurance money? It was a moment of madness. I regret it. Saying sorry won't fix everything. If you were supposed to save $1,000 a month for me, what happened to that? "I am doing that," Tyler stammered. "Oh, really? Then you can pay for this hospital, stay with that money." Tyler panicked because his bank account was almost empty. I knew this because I managed our finances and kept track of our bank accounts. I discovered that instead of saving money, Tyler was sending it to another woman. I hired a detective and found out Tyler had cheated on me and had a child with his affair partner. The money was going to his affair partner as child support for his kid, 4 years old. Cute age, huh? Have you been visiting her? How long have you known? "A month now," I revealed. Tyler was shocked. Then I dropped another bomb on him. "Really? I was shocked because you're paying child support for someone else's child." Tyler looked confused because he believed the child was his own. I couldn't help but laugh. "What the hell are you talking about? That kid is truly mine," Tyler said angrily. Hearing this, I burst out laughing even more. Tyler looked at me as if I was something creepy. So, I decided to reveal the truth to him. "You see, you can't even have children," I said, laughing at his bewildered expression. "Since we met, you really thought I was the reason we couldn't have kids. Well, I was considerate and didn't tell you, but your father knows." "It's a lie," Tyler said, his face drained of color. In reality, we had been trying infertility treatments for about 3 years since we got married. Tyler reluctantly took the test, and it turned out the issue was with him. But after discussing with my father-in-law, we decided not to tell Tyler. My father-in-law believed Tyler, who was emotionally fragile, wouldn't handle the news well. After explaining all this, Tyler suddenly called someone on his phone. "Hey, you had an affair, didn't you? The kid isn't mine, is it?" Tyler yelled into the phone. I realized he was talking to his affair partner. They argued back and forth, but it seemed Tyler was getting nowhere. At that moment, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard Tyler accuse her of having an affair too. Ignoring Tyler's heated conversation, I brought the discussion back to us. "Remember signing the papers when we decided to save that $1,000 you spent?" I asked. Tyler seemed dismissive, but I sighed, knowing he probably planned to backtrack anyway. I showed him a photo on my phone. "It's written here that in the event of misuse, divorce, and the entire amount spent up to the discovered month will be paid to the wife, Amy. It's properly checked. And there's a signature too, right? It's even notarized." Tyler looked frustrated, then turned to me with desperate eyes. "Please, Amy, I was just possessed. Please don't say divorce, okay? Besides, I can't pay such a large amount. Divorce is settled. I can't do it anymore. But don't worry, you can pay the spent amount in installments." Seeing him like that, with a face like he was the victim, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I sighed and called out to the figure hiding at the entrance of the hospital room. "Please come in, Dad." As his father-in-law entered, Tyler shouted, but his father-in-law's face was red with anger. "This is the end of our relationship." "What are you talking about?" Tyler asked, confused. His father-in-law came over to me, apologizing. "I'm truly sorry. I won't ask for forgiveness, and it's fine if you don't. Please file a complaint. I'm just glad Amy is safe. Thank you." I could see tears streaming down his face, and I glared at Tyler, knowing he was the reason for making my beloved father-in-law feel this way. "Don't you feel anything seeing this? It's your fault. Always spending money, earning more than me, and your rich family is stingy. I don't know why I married you." "So you were after the money too?" I said, feeling like all our beautiful memories had been tainted. My voice was the lowest it had ever been. Tyler looked surprised, and I forced a smile. "Marrying for money and then having to pay it back in the end. Huh, shut up. I'm not paying." "Too bad. Payment is a done deal," my father-in-law said sternly to Tyler, who went pale and started shaking. Just then, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat entered, interrupting the tense atmosphere. He handed me a document. "Is there a reason you're not receiving treatment for your leg?" he asked. Confused, I looked at Tyler, who avoided my gaze. "If you have surgery on your leg, you'll be able to move again. Didn't you hear that when you were diagnosed before?" The doctor continued. "I didn't hear," I said, looking at Tyler, who remained silent. Realizing something was wrong, I turned to the doctor. "Could you please tell me the diagnosis directly? I didn't hear it at the time." The doctor explained that my illness was temporary paralysis caused by a herniated disc, and with rehabilitation, I would be able to walk again. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had trusted Tyler's lies about my condition, but now I knew the truth. There's not a shred of affection left. "Tyler, what's going on? Say something!" My father-in-law yelled, but Tyler just cried, overwhelmed by everything. And in that moment, I realized that if I were free from Tyler, I could truly roam the world again. I'm always left behind. If she's in a wheelchair, she will always stay home and won't have more fun than me, right? So what? Your selfish jealousy has forced me to live in a wheelchair for 2 years, knowing I could have surgery to eliminate the pain and paralysis, and you kept silent. That's the worst. At my words, Tyler hangs his head in exhaustion. I look at him with cold eyes, and both the doctor and my father-in-law seem angry at Tyler for selfishly denying me my chance for treatment. "So, Amy, may I explain the surgery to you tomorrow?" the doctor asks. Yes, please do, I say, instantly brightening up. The doctor smiles back warmly, giving me hope for a bright future ahead. I will instruct the nurse to separate the rooms, the doctor says. No, I don't want to be separated from Amy, Tyler loudly refuses, but the doctor ignores him and leaves the room. Amy, you're not really gonna divorce me, right? I'm an amputee, remember? I know I was wrong to keep quiet, but think about our current situation, Tyler pleads. Despite my father-in-law yelling at Tyler for his selfishness, he stands his ground. After about 10 minutes of silence, I reluctantly speak up. Then I'm gonna work and you'll handle the chores. If you ask for a service, you'll pay for it. Oh, and I'll deduct that amount from the living expenses. Tyler protests, saying he can't live like that, but I point out that's exactly what he said to me. Finally noticing, Tyler's face turns pale as he freezes in place. Realizing the gravity of his words, my father-in-law's face also turns pale. It must have been a shock to learn that his son had said such terrible things to his wife. Well, let's talk through lawyers from now on, and about the compensation too, I say, ready to move forward. Wait, Amy, Tyler calls out as a nurse comes into the room. It seems I'm moving rooms so Tyler can't easily barge in anymore. Tyler resists to the end, screaming as I leave the room, his cries fading as the door closes behind me. After being pushed out of the room by the nurse, I met my father-in-law's eyes, and we exchanged nods. That was the last time I saw Tyler. A few months later, I received divorce papers from him through a lawyer, and the divorce was successfully finalized. I heard that Tyler was quite disheartened and is now living under the strict supervision of my father-in-law. Although he managed to keep his clerical job, it seems that news of the divorce leaked, and his colleagues, who were initially concerned about his injury, now look at him coldly. Tyler brought this upon himself, but I heard him lamenting about being harassed by his colleagues. I couldn't help but bitterly smile, realizing he hasn't changed a bit. Despite the divorce, I still meet my father-in-law occasionally. Initially, he seemed apologetic, but recently he's getting back to his usual self. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Tyler's affair partner was married and had been married to the real father of her child. I sent evidence of the affair and child support transfers to her husband, which caused a huge dispute and eventually led to their divorce. Although I received a resentful letter at the lawyer's office, I ignored it. Meanwhile, I underwent surgery immediately after the divorce and spent about 6 months in the hospital for physical therapy. Thanks to my father-in-law's arrangements, I could continue working while staying in a private room. After being discharged, ongoing physical therapy and regular checkups helped me regain mobility, and now I can walk with a cane. Recently, I've been taking walks around the house. I even exchanged contact information with someone I met during these walks and promised to go for a meal. He's a very kind person who helped me when I stumbled and fell over a rock. These days, the exhilarating feeling of a new spring fills me with excitement, and I feel unstoppable. You're terrible at cooking, James. Go freeze outside with your failed meal, she yelled, slamming the window shut and locking it. I hurried to the window, pleading for James to open it as I pounded on the glass. But he just smirked and closed the curtains. The cold started to creep in, and I began to shake. My body, warm just moments ago from the heater, was quickly losing its heat. What will happen if it stays this cold? Even my baby inside me. I was about to faint from the freezing cold when someone suddenly reached out to help. Are you okay? The next day, I came back home with him. James was outside, freezing naked. I was stunned at the sight, but Liam stepped forward. Isn't that what you said? If you can't cook properly, then freeze outside. Liam gave James a stern look and spoke in a cold tone. James, shivering in the yard, could barely muster a response. I'll call for an ambulance out of kindness. Emily, do you have anything to say to him before it arrives? I nodded and stepped closer to James. My name is Emily Smith. I'm 28 years old and stay at home. When I was working, my mom got sick and passed away. Then, my dad suddenly died from a heart problem. I was left all alone since I'm the only child. It was really hard being by myself, but I kept busy with work. Emily, are you okay? You seem stressed. During that tough time, my husband James was there for me. He comforted me when I felt sad and alone. Eventually, we fell in love and got married after dating for a few years. We're so happy to have such a wonderful woman in our family, my in-laws said. James, you've brought home a great lady. After our wedding, I moved in with James' family, and we all got along great. Emily, I saw a new cafe near the train station on TV. Let's check it out sometime, James suggested. Sure, I'd love to. I especially bonded with my mother-in-law, and we made it a tradition to go out for a meal once a week. I also connected well with my father-in-law, who enjoys cooking, and we've cooked together in the kitchen a few times. I'm happy you're getting along with my family, but what about my younger brother? He can be a bit of a handful, James asked. Oh, he's fine. Liam, my brother-in-law, and I don't talk much because he works from home and stays in his room most of the time. But when I showed interest in his work, he explained it to me in detail. So, I've been getting along well with James' family. A few years later, I found out I was pregnant with James' child. Because of how bad my morning sickness was, I decided to quit my job. I think that's a good call. Don't overdo it, James agreed. Deciding to quit wasn't just my choice. I talked it over with James' family. Both James and Liam make enough money for us to live comfortably. I also have savings, and with my father-in-law working and my mother-in-law having a part-time job, quitting my job won't cause any issues. Wow, pregnant women have it easy. No work, no complaints, someone remarked. Lately, James has been complaining about me not working. But during our discussions about me quitting my job, James was actually the one who suggested it first. He said, "You're just freeloading without a job, acting all high and mighty." Who's acting high and mighty? I'm the one who always cleans up after you, I retorted. I've always been competitive, so I wanted to prove James wrong. If you had a problem, you should have spoken up during our discussions. You were the one who brought it up, right, James? Instead of complaining, focus on your own responsibilities. My parents-in-law agree with me and support my decision. James feels left out. He and Liam don't get along, so Liam never supports James. James looks down on me because I work from home. He doesn't listen to me and doesn't think I'm helpful. Liam whispered this, which is why he doesn't join our conversations. James doesn't like this, and when we're alone, he complains even more. Just because my family likes you doesn't mean you should act all high and mighty. I'm not acting that way. Everyone is just being reasonable. Even when it's just the two of us, I never used to lose arguments to James. But when the morning sickness started, I lost the energy to argue. Pregnancy isn't an illness. If you're not working, James thinks you're just lazy. I agree. Pregnancy isn't an illness, but Emily is putting in a lot of effort to nurture another life. That's hard work in itself, Liam acknowledged. Liam started helping out too. Whenever James complained to me, Liam would step in and tell his parents. While James got scolded by them, Liam took care of me. At this rate, it's hard to tell who the real father is, I joked, rubbing my belly. With my in-laws keeping an eye on things, I hoped James would eventually change. Until then, I kept trusting him. Oh, James isn't back yet? No, not yet. Suddenly, James started coming home late all the time. He claimed it was because of overtime, but I wasn't sure if that was true. Even on his days off, he'd say he was working late or got called in unexpectedly and wouldn't come home at all. I began to suspect James was cheating, and so did his parents. We tried to gather evidence together, but it was tough to catch him in the act. He always seemed to be at the office, and we couldn't find any evidence of him seeing another woman. Well, we can't really know what's going on inside the company, his parents said. I asked one of his coworkers, but she said everything seemed normal. Hey, Emily, take it easy, she told me. My morning sickness got so bad that I couldn't do any housework. But my father-in-law cooked, my mother-in-law helped with other chores, and Liam pitched in, so everything was okay. You should be ashamed of yourself. Lying around all day, not doing any housework, even though you're a homemaker? Why are you even here? James, who had seen his parents doing chores, woke me up one night just to say that. When I looked upset, Liam replied, "That's rich coming from someone who's not pulling his weight as a husband. Every time you challenge me, even though I'm the eldest. Well, you're not exactly the role model type of brother. You've always been a bit of a know-it-all," Liam retorted. The argument between the brothers escalated, almost turning physical, before their parents stepped in to stop them. After hearing what happened, their parents scolded James, saying, "That's enough. Do whatever you want." "Wait, James, where are you going without talking to me?" James left without a word. "I'm really sorry about that. We apologize," their parents said to me in place of James, and the situation calmed down. However, James's behavior has been worsening, and something needs to be done soon. I was at a loss for what to do. Is everything okay? One Saturday, my in-laws had planned a trip for a local event. Despite arranging it beforehand, they were worried about leaving me alone due to James's recent behavior. "I'm concerned about leaving you," my mother-in-law said. "I'll be fine. My morning sickness has eased up a lot," I assured them. They left with concern, and around the same time, Liam had overnight commitments. "I'm sorry for leaving at this time," Liam said. "It's okay. Take care," I replied. Not long after they left, Liam also departed. James was unusually at home that day, still asleep. Despite not feeling my best, I decided to get up and do things around the house. I didn't want to risk James's criticism if I stayed idle. Thankfully, my father-in-law had prepared plenty of dishes and stored them in the fridge. I started cleaning and doing laundry, taking it easy on myself. "Hey, breakfast!" James finally woke up close to noon, still looking grumpy with messy hair. He demanded breakfast, and I rolled my eyes, grabbing some leftovers from the fridge. "What's that? Leftovers your dad made you? You can't even cook as a homemaker," James remarked. His comment annoyed me. Why does he say things like this? Doesn't he realize I'm pregnant with his child? There's no excuse for his behavior. Sorry, but right now, my main job is taking care of our baby. Household chores can wait. How dare you talk to your husband like that? James shouted at me, but then Liam barged in, breaking the tension. I could hear them arguing loudly outside. "You stay out of this." James snapped at Liam before storming off to his room, muttering angrily. As expected, James made a racket and then left the house. Liam let out a heavy sigh. "You okay?" Liam asked as he entered the room. "Yeah, what brings you here?" I replied. "I just came to pick up something I forgot," Liam explained, looking at me with concern. I chuckled, noticing how much he resembled his mother. "It's all right, go ahead. Don't worry about me," I assured him. "Okay then, I'll head out," Liam said, hesitating for a moment before leaving. I couldn't help but wonder, where did the James I first met go? At this rate, it seemed like divorce was inevitable. But I still wanted to remain close to my in-laws. Feeling suddenly drained, I decided to lie down. And before I knew it, I fell into a deep sleep. "Emily, time to wake up." James's voice interrupted my sleep. I mumbled as I sat up. I met James's eyes, expecting him to scold me. However, he gave me a wry smile. I'm sure I'll get an earful from James later, I thought. "I wanted to let you sleep, but it's already evening," James said in a surprisingly gentle tone. I was shocked by his kindness. "I've prepared dinner, so when you're ready, come join me," he added before leaving the room. I noticed a blanket over me and couldn't help but wonder if James had covered me. I went to the kitchen and found my father-in-law's dishes already warmed up, ready to eat. "I'm sorry, Emily," James said sincerely. "When I found out we were having a baby, I was thrilled, but then I got overwhelmed and took it out on you. This cake is my way of apologizing." James presented a cake to me. Honestly, this gesture couldn't erase all the past hurts, but his genuine apology warmed my heart. For now, I decided to forgive him and enjoy our meal together. "Look, it's snowing," James exclaimed excitedly. "Oh, you're right. Let's go see," I replied, following him to the window. The sight of the snow falling against the night sky was beautiful. Since I came from a place where it rarely snowed, this was a special moment for me. Without hesitation, I moved closer to the window. "Let's open it," James suggested. "But it'll be cold," I protested. "Just put on a jacket," he insisted as he draped one over me and opened the window, letting in the chilly wind. As I braced myself against the cold, James hugged me. Suddenly, I found myself outside, and when I turned around, I saw James grinning mischievously. "You're a homemaker who doesn't do the housework. That makes you a bad wife. Think about that tonight," he teased. "Excuse me? What are you saying? You can't even cook," I retorted. With that, James shut and locked the window. I rushed to the window, pleading with James to open it as I pounded on the glass, but he just grinned and closed the curtains. The cold was starting to make me shiver. My body, warm from the heater just moments ago, was rapidly losing its warmth. What am I going to do if this continues? Even my baby inside me, just as I felt like I might pass out from the cold and shock, someone reached out to me and asked if I was okay. They helped me into their car. "Why were you out here at this time of night?" It was Liam, who had come home earlier than planned because he was worried about James. The car's heater warmed me up, and I felt relieved. "We should go to the hospital, just to be safe," Liam suggested as he drove me there. Thanks to his quick action, both my baby and I were okay. While I was being examined, Liam arranged for a hotel where we could stay. He left to take care of something else. "I'm so relieved. You're going to be a strong baby, right?" Feeling reassured, I rubbed my belly. I was grateful that nothing serious had happened. Exhausted, I fell asleep as soon as I lay down on the bed. "Oh, Emily, are you feeling better now?" Liam asked as we left the hospital. "Yes, I'm completely fine now. Thank you so much," I replied gratefully. "No problem. Shall we head home?" Liam suggested. The next day, as we arrived home, I was shocked to see James freezing naked in the yard. Liam approached him with a cold gaze and tone. "This is what you said, right? If you can't cook properly, then freeze outside." James, shivering, couldn't even respond properly. "I'll call an ambulance out of kindness." "Emily, do you want to say anything to him before it arrives?" Liam asked me. Nodding, I stepped closer to James. "It's because of you that our baby was almost in danger. I will never forgive you. Just wait," I told him firmly. James was taken to the hospital. Later, I asked Liam what happened last night after he dropped me off at the hotel. Liam returned home alone and found James sleeping in the living room, naked with another woman who seemed to be his mistress. James had brought her home, thinking we wouldn't be there, and with me locked out, he seemed confident. Liam, furious, threw James out of the house in his birthday suit, telling him to think about his actions. Then Liam interrogated the shocked mistress, gathered evidence, and sent her back to her place. It turned out she had a family too. By the time Liam informed them of everything, dawn was approaching. He took a short nap in the car and then came to pick me up. That's how everything unfolded. "I've talked to my parents. They said they're coming home today," Liam told me with a gentle smile, staying by my side until they returned. "It's going to be okay now, Liam." "Thank you so much," I said gratefully. "Nah, I just did what needed to be done. Thanks to him, I could feel safe at home," Liam replied. "I'm so sorry, that idiot. I can't apologize enough." James immediately apologized upon their return and faced their wrath. James was forced to pay child support, and it was decided that he would be kicked out. "I'm so sorry. It was just a mistake, Emily. I truly love only you," James pleaded, but I ignored him. I wish he'd stop treating me like a fool, I thought to myself. Suddenly, James became aggressive, raising his hand at me. "Enough is enough, my Dan's son." Liam intervened, grabbing and twisting James's arm. With the help of my father-in-law, James was easily overpowered, and I felt relieved. I really just lost my mind for a moment. Emily, James said remorsefully as he was thrown out by the two men, while I was comforted by my mother-in-law. He was pathetic until the very end, I thought to myself. As for James, that's all I ever thought. By the way, Liam's pretty strong, isn't he? Considering what just happened and how he tossed a full-grown man outside, Emily remarked. Oh yeah, he used to do combat sports back in the day. I wouldn't recommend trying that move on just anyone though, Liam said with a smile. Emily felt a flutter in her heart at his smile, and her mother-in-law laughed upon noticing. With such good looks and strength, it's surprising he doesn't have a girlfriend, her mother-in-law teased. Liam bashfully looked away, which Emily found endearing. From then on, Emily decided to stay and be cared for in her in-laws' home since she had no other family or reliable person to turn to. If you'd allow, I'd love to hold your baby, her mother-in-law said. Of course, anytime, Emily replied. Right now, the four of us are eagerly awaiting the birth of my precious baby, Emily thought to herself. Talking to Liam, Emily found out that James the Fair was with a junior from his office. No wonder she wouldn't spill the beans when asked, Emily thought. The two of them were sneaking around and getting cozy at various spots. Once I reported it to the junior's husband, he did a thorough investigation. With that evidence, my divorce process went smoothly. Both of them got fired for fooling around during work hours and for claiming their dates as business expenses, Emily recounted. Thank you for all the help, Emily said to Liam. Well, it's only natural to want to help someone you love, right? Liam replied, his face turning beet red. Wait, what? Emily was surprised, and both of them blushed. Then Emily found out that Liam had feelings for her for a long time. I always thought I should hide these feelings, Liam confessed. I never imagined he felt that way about me, Emily thought. Honestly, I'm not ready to be in a relationship like that right now, Emily said. I understand, but if you can wait a bit, I want to explore these feelings, Liam said. Emily smiled, and Liam smiled back happily. I'm going to do everything I can to make you see how much I care, Liam declared. Okay, I'll be ready for that, Emily replied. Liam's parents overheard their conversation during dinner, which was really delicious. Looks like Liam has a girlfriend now, his mother teased. Liam blushed and responded playfully. Both his father and I laughed at that, Emily remembered. Afterwards, I gave birth to our lovely daughter right on time, Emily proudly shared. She's so cute. Congratulations. She looks just like Emily, adorable. Liam's parents said. I don't want to let her go, Liam said happily, embracing his role as a father. Years later, I happily married Liam again, and our daughter calls him Daddy. Liam adores her. Emily remembered fondly. I think our next child will be a boy, Liam guessed. Yeah, that would be cool if he's like me. But having a boy who looks like you would be awesome too, Liam added. I'm pregnant with our second child now. Our daughter is thrilled about becoming a big sister, Emily said happily. We're all thinking of names together. It seems like our daughter's suggestion might win, Emily laughed. I'm going to make Emily our daughter and the new baby happy, Liam promised. Don't forget about yourself in that promise, Emily said with a smile. We're planning to live happily ever after, all 6 of us together, having fun and getting along. That's our plan, Emily concluded. We can't wait to go out together as a family